The Starship Camaro is ready for takeoff. "1984 was a memorable year for a lot of things, and in many ways, it signaled the start of the return of performance in American muscle cars. We still reference George Orwell's concept of Big Brother from his book entitled 1984, and it was also the year of the launch of the Macintosh computer. But for American performance car enthusiasts, 84 marked the launch of the high-tech C4 Corvette, but today we're taking a peek at its little brother, a 1984 Chevrolet Camaro Z28 time capsule with just over 24,000 miles on the dial. Now, before we scoff at the concept of a less than 200 horsepower 1980s Camaro being a muscle car, we're applying that term to what was available at the time. The mid-1980s were all about smaller cars, front-wheel drive, and tightening emissions and fuel economy standards, so enthusiasts were happy just to have the choice of any V8-powered rear-drive sporty car offerings. The 1984 Z28 made hungry performance car customers happy to the tune of over 100,000 Z28s sold, with over 265,000 Camaros sold. Apparently, the now cheesy, full-on 80s commercials worked.
Chevrolet is taking charge with a new high-output Camaro. A Camaro Z28 that did a test track 0 to 55 in 6 seconds. A Camaro with remarkable new handling. A Camaro with sure-footed braking. Z28 Camaro. More beauty, more beast.
Chevrolet!
And you
Taking charge!
The 84Z featured very aerodynamic styling, as Chevrolet tried to eke out all the tricks they could to help fuel economy ratings. This particular car is wearing the popular black color scheme with red and orange stripes and silver lower accents, and it rolls on iconic cast aluminum 15-inch wheels. A non-functional NACA-type scoop breaks up the expansive flat hood, and a small ducktail spoiler sits at the base of the hatchback rear glass over the large rear taillights. This one even has T-tops. These third-generation Camaros are good-looking cars. Inside, the 1980s are on full display, with forward-looking elements only hindered by a lack of technology to back them up. We dug the dual needle speedometer that points to metric and miles per hour on opposite sides, and a 7,000 RPM tach for an engine that wheezes out about 5,500 RPM. Plastic is everywhere, and the design is edgy and stark at the same time. An overhead console houses two interesting gadgets: a fully analog reminder center that consisted of various topic thumb wheels you turned to remind yourself of important items like financial, celebration, and recreation. Behind that hangs the removable flashlight, a good idea that didn't seem to catch on, probably because it got lost after the second or third use. But the Z28 name means performance, right? The optional L69 5.0 HO-V8 cranked out a relatively underwhelming 190 horsepower and 200 pound-feet of torque from 305 cubic inches, but those were pretty big numbers for the time. The standard LG4 305 was only 150 horsepower. The 305 utilized an electronic feedback Rochester quadrajet carburetor, iron heads with a 9.5-to-1 compression ratio, but it was choked out with restrictive exhaust and a catalytic converter. This one is tied to a 4-speed automatic overdrive 700R4 transmission backed with a 10-bolt rear end loaded with the limited slip differential and 373 gears. A 5-speed Tremec T5 manual was also available. Where the 84Z did perform was in the turns. After all, emissions compliance had nothing to do with suspension compliance. The third Gen Z is a full unibody design, so no more twisty subframe holding the engine and front suspension. These cars utilized the front strut design and coil springs at all four corners. Front and rear sway bars helped them perform in the turns, and a torque arm ran from the transmission cross member to the rear axle for better traction. Four-wheel disc brakes were the best ever on a Camaro, and the stiff body and tuned suspension earned these cars high praise as the best handling American cars by the automotive press. So although they weren't that fast, with quarter-mile times in the mid-16s, their precise handling and clean styling made them fun cars to drive. So much so that 1984 marks the third highest sales year in Camaro history, and a number not achieved ever since. We hope you enjoyed your trip back to the 80s in the Starship Camaro on Muscle Car of the Week. Oh look, recreation time.